You are about 15 minutes away from meeting your long-lost family. This is crazy. How do you feel? Hey guys, Tim Ballard here. We have a special treat for you. We're going to be interviewing this amazing woman, Belle Barbu. Belle has an amazing story. She was born 25 years ago in Romania. Some evil people were somehow involved in that process in the hospital, told the parents after taking the baby away that the baby had died and sent them away. They were poor farmers, and so they didn't have a lot of standing to fight back. They said get out or to question, and they were left with this false narrative of what happened to their daughter. And off she went to an orphanage, a trafficking orphanage, and then for lots of money, that orphanage then adopted her, and she was sent to the United States. What happened? You get this research, they know what they know, but it's not that much. I mean, obviously, you were kidnapped in a hospital, thrown to an orphanage. Yeah. That part's gonna be tough to bridge. How did you get to your family?
It's a good question. So, it was actually through Facebook. It's called No Adoptee Left Behind. And it's really amazing. They just are 3 girls, or women, and they have a lot of connections. And so when I told them, I sent this email to them, and they're like, my family's from Sadova, Romania, and they knew exactly, so it's really small. And they have this place with all the records, census records. And they're like, yep, there's one Romanian family, Barbu, let's call them. And they did, and they were in Italy.
And then 24 years later, someone calls and says, we found your birth daughter.
Yeah.
And what was their reaction? Do you know her?
I so wish I could have been there to see it.
Yeah.
I bet you they probably dropped to their knees.
Yeah. Yep. And then, of course, they want to see you. So next week you're going to meet them. Is the whole family going to be there?
Some of it's uncertain because there's a lot of us.
What would stop them from getting there?
Finances.
Okay. So you call them and tell them that's not a problem. We're going to cover that for them. Okay. Including the kids. Because you have to meet your nieces and nephews. Better call them today, like right now. So
I will. Yeah.
There's so many emotions that come up when watching and listening to that video clip we just played. It's designed to be something that shows that there is hope, that there is community, that there is family, and there's love, and there's a lot of compassion for people who have gone through some of the most horrific things in life. And we wanted to show this so that you can see some of the happy sides of what happens when discussions come about, like the one we're about to have today, around child trafficking, around the evils that lurk in every corner throughout the world. And me being a father, when I watch that video and when I watch the movie that we're going to discuss later on, it brings up so much emotion because I can only imagine what would happen, how it can tear apart families and friendships, and even when people are reunited with their families and their loved ones, there's still a lot of scars and there's still a lot of pain and trauma that has to be worked through. So we wanted to come onto the show today and have an episode to talk about Sound of Freedom. And I recently watched this movie in the theater, and I had been hearing a lot of controversy around it. I've been hearing a lot of discussions around it, and I wanted to watch it for myself. And I wanted to listen to several different interviews in which the director, the producers, and the actors that are all involved in this beautiful mission. I wanted to be able to talk about it on the show and to react to it in real time. Some of these things I'm watching for the first time, like that video that was just played, is the first time that I saw that. And it's just like, wow. So there's going to be a certain heaviness throughout this episode, but we wanted to start off by showing that there is hope. And if we can bring about more conversations like this in real time and not just sort of sweep this under the rug and hope that it just goes away by itself, we want to talk about it. So today, we delve into the gripping film Sound of Freedom and explore its powerful subject matter, child trafficking. We take you on an emotional journey through the life and work of Tim Ballard, a former special agent for the Department of Homeland Security, whose unwavering dedication to combating child exploitation has touched the lives of thousands. We curated interview highlights with Tim Ballard himself and gained unique insights into the challenges faced by anti-trafficking professionals. Today, Tim serves as senior advisor to the Spear Fund, an innovative approach uniting anti-trafficking organizations and compassionate individuals worldwide to put an end to human trafficking once and for all. This episode highlights the courage, resilience, and unwavering determination of Ballard and his allies in the fight against child trafficking. This is definitely important. It's powerful. Here's the trailer. Check it out.
How'd that make you feel? Giving a child his freedom.
Felt good.
You have been at this for 12 years.
My country, 'tis of thee.
Why are you doing it?
Because God's children are not for sale. It is the fastest growing international crime network that the world has ever seen.
We're Homeland Security. You know we can't go off rescuing Honduran kids in Colombia.
This job tears you to pieces. And this is my one chance to put those pieces back together.
And yet somehow you have failed to bring me one real-world lead.
It's over, Tim. Close up and come back home.
So you quit your job and you go and rescue those kids.
South of that river is all rebel territory. No one goes in.
What if this was your daughter?
Sorry, she's gone.
Hear that? That's the sound of freedom.
And I've got chills. I've got chills watching that again. And you know, I had seen the trailer before, but watching that trailer now with you really brings back a lot of emotion again, because you know, I just recently watched that film in the theater, and I would encourage all of you to go out and watch this, share this, bring people to this conversation if you have to or need to. And I just have to say that I don't think we're going to be presenting any spoilers, because there's really nothing to spoil. It's child trafficking is bad. It's terrible. And some people do get rescued, but a lot haven't. And so we want to be the voice of those who are still being trafficked. And we want to help to shed light on this topic in the best way that we can. And I know that this is a health and wellness and fitness podcast, but this is also something that is close to my heart. And I think that we got to talk about it, you know. And Gordon, you haven't had a chance to see this film yet, right?
No, I haven't seen it yet, but I've done a lot of research in this subject matter. As like we kind of mentioned in the our text thread, when you do follow the money, you tend to eventually come across some of these black operations and illegal operations. And I think people who have done a little bit of research into the national security state, the military industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, tend to see that we have illegal arms trade and drug trafficking, looking at Iran-Contra and various, you know, famous public historical events where this was clearly shown. But there is unfortunately another side of this that is now surpassing both of those and becoming one of the largest illegal means of financing various operations in the private and public sector. And it involves, yes, this human trafficking element. And even what that word means and the various levels to it, I don't think people fully appreciate, in particular, especially Tim Ballard's work and what their group specializes in. But I think we've got a good show today, showing, reacting to this, because it is important in culture. And I think it's also important with global health in a lot of ways, just even if you are a survivor, I think something we talked about too is just mental health is another huge component, especially with men's mental health nowadays, and the idea of healthy masculinity examples. I think we need to kind of, as we've discussed, whatever way we can help to build bridges between this idea of like toxic males and sort of these concepts. We don't want to get sidetracked here, but essentially this has become another subject that's become a little bit pigeonholed, and we'll touch on that too as well. That'll be sort of the next segments we can get into, is how the media is reacting to all of this.
Yeah, because for me, I find it absurd that there's even a glimpse of a controversy around this. This is something that is far beyond partisanship. This is something that I think all of us should be able to look at, understand, and correct immediately. Now, like you correctly mentioned, there's obviously a money component to it. It always is always going to be. But this is something that has tentacles in everyone's life. It's like 1 degree of separation from every single person on this planet. And maybe it's 2 degrees, 3 degrees, but still, like, this affects everyone. It affects society. When I became a father, I immediately became a little bit more empathetic to mothers of the world, to see just how much sacrifice is involved in taking care of these little human beings, and then to see them get ripped from your arms, or to know that they've been kidnapped. Like, again, a part of the film is, it's so gripping because I can relate as a father. A father takes his 2 kids to this modeling thing, and who doesn't want to help out their kids and show that they can be successful in a variety of things, to then find out that they're now gone. Like, they're not in the bed. You don't take them to school, you don't pick them up from school, you don't feed them, they're gone. And then to find out that they also are being trafficked in a way that is just insane. Like,
yeah,
to me,
the worst
it's like,
nightmare for a parent. It is the worst nightmare I think for most parents. And
yeah,
and I think that's the psychological component to this that's a little bit hard for when I discuss this with parents and grandparents. The cognitive dissonance essentially is a big component that, unfortunately, these predators, and we'll just call them that, these people are predators, they utilize, they use our not wanting this to be true to actually be weaponized. And that's really effed up and unfortunate, but that's a reality that also is very important to be educated on, as Ballard and others talk about, so that you're not taken advantage of, or your child's not. And this doesn't mean you should live in fear on this, but it's just about being educated so that you have smart ways to protect yourself and the ones you love. And essentially, yes, that's a big component to all of this, and why this has been continued, whether it's from the micro to the macro. The psychological component, that it's so hard to accept this truth that it's happening, and at the scale it's happening, and by all indicators, having to be allowed by various players and institutions that should be safeguarding us from this. People don't want to accept that truth, and the more we don't accept that truth, the more that this allows these people to do and get away with what they're doing. So just try to keep that in mind, to kind of give yourself the courage to, when you don't want to look at this, to remember why it is important to. And we're not going to get into like anything graphic or showing videos of anything too heavy. This is all just going to be mainly highlights from interviews with Ballard, and we'll get into now showing how the media is responding to this, and how this overall broader discussion, which the media plays a large hand in, has to be more empathetic and nonpartisan, and not try to find a way to make this sensationalized in the various ways you'll see that breaking points we'll start with is going to speak to here.
Whenever I travel, I try my best to check out from the news completely. But I confess, only 2 things actually piqued my interest while I was gone. Affirmative action, which I touched on yesterday, and then rumblings about a movie that I had not heard of, Sound of Freedom. From what I could gather, it was doing very well in the US despite expectations. But only upon my return did I decide to look into it. Not only in the movie, but an increasingly shrill and elite effort to stop people from watching the movie, and why. So to begin with, what is The Sound of Freedom? Well, it's a movie loosely based on the life of Tim Ballard. He's the founder of an Operation Underground Railroad, an organization dedicated to combating global child trafficking. Ballard previously served as a special agent in the Department of Homeland Security to combat child pornography and child endangerment, but left to start his own organization after he says he found bureaucratic red tape that frustrated his ability to try and save children in developing countries. The film dramatizes efforts by Ballard and his organization to infiltrate child sex trafficking organizations abroad, but bust them, then save the kids, and press lawmakers to pass laws to make it more difficult. Overall, the film has been a shocking, dramatic success so far. Some $40 million at the box office in a few days, and has come close even to the latest release of the Indiana Jones franchise. So the question arises, why is there even a controversy around this movie at all? Well, apparently, child sex trafficking as a topic itself has now been very politicized in the eyes of these media organizations, effectively being linked in any mention whatsoever with the QAnon movement. Now, criticism of the movie effectively says that it dramatizes the problem of child sex trafficking globally and feeds QAnon conspiracies by validating it as a reality. This was effectively the criticism that CNN brought on its air regarding the movie. Let's take a listen.
This film is being marketed to either specific QAnon believers or to people who believe all of the same tenets as QAnon, but claim they don't know what it is.
And The Sound of Freedom does focus on a real issue of sex trafficking. But that theme, it's sort of like that kernel of truth that feeds the QAnon conspiracy theory. Tell us how those two things work together.
Sure, and the most durable and the most believable conspiracy theories are not entirely false. There's something in them that is true, and the rest of it is false. But the believers point to the one true thing, and they say, oh, you don't believe that this particular thing is true. In terms of child trafficking, we know trafficking is real. We know it has real victims. No one is denying that. But these films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites, and only people like Tim Ballard and only people like Jim Caviezel, and by extension, only people like the ticket buyer can help bring these trafficking rings down.
Okay, so the criticism is actually simple. The film is being marketed towards QAnon believers or those unwittingly are buying into QAnon who watch the movie. But in the same breath, they do acknowledge, of course, that child sex trafficking is real, but that the idea that elites participating in it is ridiculous. Well, perhaps they have not heard of Epstein's Island, but below all of this, I find myself asking a simple question. Why are the CNN, these other liberal media organizations, spending so much time going after one of the most basic movie ideas of all time, based on a true story? Rolling Stone took the same tactic in the review of the movie, saying Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms and described it as, quote, a QAnon-tinged thriller about child trafficking designed to appeal to the conscience of a conspiracy-addled boomer. The review evidence for why the movie is QAnon adjacent is that some people on some QAnon boards are heralding the movie, and once again took aim at the movie for validating that child sex trafficking is a big problem in our society. They write, quote, there is visible suffering all around us in America. There are poor and unhoused, people brutalized, killed by police. There are mass shootings, lack of healthcare, climate disasters. And yet over and over again, the far right returns to these sordid fantasies about godless monsters hurting children. I mean, once again, is anyone saying that any of those problems are not real? Are they just even saying that by watching this movie or supporting it, that child sex trafficking is the biggest problem that we face? Or are they just saying it's a problem ignored or not paying enough attention to in society? The Guardian also parroted the same line in their review of the film. They called it QAnon adjacent. And once again, they are the only ones shoehorning anything political into this interpretation. They readily admit that Taken, a film already made starring Liam Neeson, invented this genre, and that the film seeks to replicate its very success. To prove QAnon connections, reviews focus on the star of the film and his past comments, but they seldom find any specific example overtly in the movie tying it to a conspiracy. In my opinion, you do not have to be a crazy person to believe child sex trafficking is a problem, and it shouldn't be a political statement, actually, to go on an entertaining film trying to highlight this subject. I particularly found it funny that Rolling Stone described the movie as the dream of boomer dads and described the plot as some sort of white savior complex, considering that the current data released so far via Variety indicates ticket buyers to this film are, quote, predominantly female, and that a full 1/3 of the audience so far is Hispanic. Someone should ask these female Latinos what they think of that criticism. And in fact, I actually think this demographic validates something important about the film. Vulnerable children in developing countries are preyed upon by wealthy people both in country and who travel abroad specifically to indulge in these disgusting fantasies. anyone who has ever been to Thailand or walked the streets of Bangkok or Phuket, like I have, knows what this film describes is a very real and gross phenomenon. The large Hispanic audience from the film may even have personal experience with this issue, considering that Latin America remains one of the global hotspots of child trafficking today. Furthermore, the real line that the media appears to be going with is that any discussion of elites and child sex trafficking by definition validates every QAnon conspiracy ever. And first of all, it's as if they want to pretend, as I said, that Epstein never happened and that we still don't know all of the people who were involved there. But second, why does someone somewhere believing something wacky invalidate what before QAnon has always been acknowledged as a pervasive problem plaguing U.S. law enforcement globally? Broadly, the success of the film does speak volumes. It is running on par at the box office, as I said, with Indiana Jones, undeniably already called a summer box office hit, with effectively zero mainstream promotion and strength only from online support and word of mouth. Hollywood pros are already saying it is especially noteworthy that it hit the top 5 in a time reserved for the biggest blockbusters in all of Hollywood. And at the end of the day, people want to be entertained, and they also don't want to be told what to think. So maybe things in entertainment will be okay after all.
Wow. Like that he was saying almost exactly what you and I both were alluding to and actually saying is that how and why is there even controversy around this? And that's, I think it's all by design, right? So divide and conquer is one of those well-known tactics to sort of take over. And it's very similar to the UFO UAP discussion in that when you make people look crazy and you lump them into a partisan group, it's easier to attack said people, or it's like funneling a big army into a bottleneck so that you can destroy them easier. I feel like I'm glad that you showed that because I hadn't seen that piece you just showed, but I think people hearing that and seeing that should immediately question how we're being sheeped or shepherded, how we're being pushed into a certain thought process. It's easy because we see it right there. Like that is exact evidence of how we're being manipulated to think a certain way. So that's my piece.
Yeah, no, I mean, the power of the media has always been extremely influential. Whether we're talking the printing press, or when television first came out, or radio, now it's internet, whatever the medium of the day is, if you have a very strong, oligopoly or, monopoly, all these various terms, essentially when there's a massive concentration of market share in a very few amount of companies, media outlets, then you start to see, it doesn't, you just do a little history into public relations and mass media and people like Edward Bernays, you understand that psychology and media merged essentially. And when business interests, saw the power of media, they immediately, watched the show Mad Men. This is an early form of all this type of thinking. So this is well known. And I think there's a famous quote from, I'm thinking on the author, but essentially, it's easier to fool a man or to convince a man that he's been fooled than to fool a man. Or essentially, you go to
it's easy. It's easier to fool a man than it is to convince a man that he's been fooled or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like no one wants to be fooled. I think that this is professional trolling. I think it's a very, very. I think from the business side of it or the media views, clicks. This is what runs the world today, right? The clicks and views and media and money. I think there's going to always be, no matter what, there's going to always be outlets that need to troll certain things that are on the rise in order to get them to be talked about. And if you really want to get dark, we just played it ourselves, right?
Well, I mean, it just leads you. I mean, this is where whether you're very skeptical, whatever, trying to look at this very neutrally, it just makes you ask the question why, and it makes people become more conspiratorial when you say why are you, is this purely political? Are you just trying to politicize this to make this seem like it's a right-wing thing and any like Trump supporter or QAnon person is associated with this, and so you're trying to like hurt them politically, and anybody who's conservative or leans away, or the more insidious conspiracy with being, or is there some way you're trying to cover up for powerful actors who are in some way complicit? And the more and more that kind of these weird flags add up, it leads people to start asking, there's more and more smoke here, similar with the cover up with UFOs, to where it gets to an overwhelming amount where people start to really come out directly and saying, yes, there is a cover-up. And now it's the onus is on us to prove that. But it's similar in this case where ultimately the hard angle for certain people really in this space is that there is essentially a cover-up as well. The only way this could occur at this scale, and I believe Ballard talks this a little, I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but there are various definitely corrupt actors, within the government and private sector who are complicit in this. And it makes sense when you're looking at the numbers, just sheer numbers of how much this is occurring, how frequently every day, the money behind it. And that's very unfortunate, but the best thing we can do is accept that reality and then move forward dealing with those corrupt actors in those, positions of power. And so that's why we'll move to the next media reacts, but that's why we show the video at the top of the program, because keep in mind, why this matters and why it's important to have courage. So you see those kind of reunions more often. So next up, we got our main man, Russell.
Sound of Freedom is smashing it at the box office and is being attacked continually by the mainstream. Is that because it's a box office success? Is it because of QAnon conspiracy theories? Is it because it's a new emergent business model? Or does the establishment have something more serious to hide? Hello there, you 6.5 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom, a voyage we can undertake together in glory and success. New stories are being told, new economic models are emerging, new challenges to the monopoly of entertainment and culture. Whether you agree with their position or presumed position or not, you have to acknowledge this is a significant, maybe even seismic shift in the way that entertainment is made, funded, promoted, and the way it reaches its audience. How has Sound of Freedom become such a success? Let me know why you went to see it. Is it because of the subject matter? Is it because you're excited that films are getting made that have a different relationship with the audience? We met with Jim Caviezel and Tim Ballard, and I'll show you an exclusive part of that conversation later. But first, let's try and understand the success of this film and have a little look at it together.
Why are you doing it?
Because God's children are not for sale.
It appears that there's a cultural thirst for a film that presents an issue that you might imagine all people would agree on is worthy of attention. The trafficking of children appears to be more pervasive than people have previously thought and are willing to discuss. And it seems that American audiences in particular, and let me know how you feel in the comments, have a real appetite to see this story told. A story that is righteous, clearly connected to Christian values. Angel Studios also, of course, made The Chosen, which is a retelling of gospel stories. And as a side note, stars my friend Jonathan as our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, but was also my body double when I used to be in HBO's show with The Rock, Ballers. So I am able to say that Jesus was my body double.
This job tears you to pieces.
It's impossible to talk about Sound of Freedom without acknowledging that part of the mainstream avenue of attack is around the QAnon connection. Now, what is this QAnon connection? It seems that just people that like QAnon also like this film. Is this film inherently right-wing? Is there something particularly or especially conservative about it? In some ways, couldn't you say it's about rescuing Latino children and breaking down exploitation? And sex trafficking is plainly bad. I'm very surprised now by the nature of the culture wars. Sometimes I find it difficult to track what side things are supposed to be on. That's actually why I've refused to participate in those categories and boundaries anymore. I do believe in freedom. I do believe in new economic models and ways of making content and entertainment. Obviously, we participate in it. And I can't help but feel that many of the attacks leveled at this movie are because this has bypassed the ordinary systems of promotion and production. This is not made by one of the big studios. This is not being promoted in the normal way. And it's still found a massive audience. I feel that the media in general are very threatened, obviously, by new independent media models because what they have is a kind of collective monopoly. I know collective monopoly sounds somewhat paradoxical, but what I mean is there's a sort of an easy tension between the media superpowers that make television and movies. And if you start to find ways where you can make content and say, look, we don't care if this is a popular subject or if you presume it has affiliations with particular political persuasions, which, by the way, are allowed. People are allowed to be conservative. People are allowed to be Republican. People are allowed to be right-wing, just the same way as people are allowed to be Democrat. People are allowed to be liberal. People are allowed to be progressive. These things shouldn't be oppositional because if they are, that is tyranny. My assumption is that the mainstream media, as with our kind of content, doesn't like the emergence of this type of model. The same way that the mainstream attacked Joe Rogan during coronavirus because of his outspoken stance on health, alternative medicines, and his willingness to have a variety of conversations on the subject of coronavirus and the handling of the pandemic. They obviously opposed the content, but they oppose even the concepts of Joe Rogan. They don't want there to be a Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is a real thorn in the side. This is comparable, I think. I really hope that the reason this film is receiving all of these criticisms and attacks is not because there's institutionalized sex trafficking to a degree where people don't want it spoken about. That's a terrible terrifying concept to me. What is easier to understand is they are threatened by the economic model itself. I don't see what it is about this film that's an attack on anybody's values. I don't understand that at all. It seems like it's somewhat anti-deep state because it's a rogue and renegade figure that breaks away from bureaucracy in order to do what he believes was necessary to be done. The fact is, it's based on the truth. Like any movie that's based on the truth, there's extemporization, there's the collapsing of characters, there's the simplification and amplification of certain events and details. That's standard in any narrativization of true events. In a way, perhaps part of the reason this film has become such a phenomenon is it provides us the opportunity to talk about the nature of conspiracy theory and censored information. Conspiracy theories over the last few years have gained a lot of momentum. Some of these conspiracy theories might be extreme, and some of them seem quite plausible. In particular, when you talk about QAnon, people start talking about Pizzagate or that furniture shop where people said it was a front for trafficking. And those might be some of the more outlandish aspects of the conspiracy theory world. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. But in our country, the UK, there was an investigation into Westminster, the seat of our parliamentary power. That's the same saying Capitol Hill in your language. And presumed nefarious activity, the worst kind of nefarious activity that you can imagine. You're spot on. In fact, the subject of this film covers exactly that activity. And mysteriously, about 3 prime ministers ago, which could have been an hour ago in our country, we churned through them, like, they lost all the evidence. That doesn't make you feel more comfortable that there is no such thing as conspiracy theories, does it? The fact that you still can't talk about the assassination of JFK, or at least you can't talk about it, you can't get access to the information, that there are aspects of the pandemic that are still heavily redacted and controlled. Conspiracy emerges out of clandestine spaces when there is no trust in authority. And the reason there's no trust in authority is because we live in a surveillance state with increasing censorship, information is being controlled with the creation of new categories. And when something like this emerges that's entrepreneurial and perhaps Christian, which is one way of looking at reality, I know a lot of you guys are Christian and I love Jesus Christ, people attack